Hello everyone, this is John from RPGs and More. And in this video, I wanted to talk about my new favorite uh, version of White Box D&D, and that is White Box Dungeon Adventures. White Box Dungeon Adventures is by James Spahn. Yes, I know I mentioned this game in an earlier video, but we're going to go in more in depth into this book specifically today. This is by James Spahn with cover by Rick Hershey, interior art by Luigi Castellani, and cartography by Geraldo Marinho. If I mispronounced that, I apologize. Published by Barrel Rider Games in 2026. So this is new. All right. Why is this one better? I did mention in a previous video about it that this book is better in my opinion for the main reason that it focuses primarily upon the dungeon in and of itself, and it includes in the back of the book some small tables and a small section about how to stock your own dungeon, and even a map that you can use, a sample map of a blank dungeon. We'll show that to you right here. And you can then stock that dungeon using the tools and tricks that are mentioned earlier in that same chapter in order to kind of be ready to go. Now, one of the reasons why I like this, because a lot of my white box gaming right now is in the solo gaming variety. Or I'm not, I do run a game for family once every several months, and that's a lot of fun. But when it comes to like the day-to-day, what I play every week, if I play white box, I'm playing it in a solo capacity. And the Dungeons and Adventures, along with the other white box compatible products that I use, helps facilitate that because it tends to get out of the way. Now, there's another system that I'm also exploring, which might also be really fun for that, and that's the sword and backpack, but that's a different video. This particular version of White Box is pretty good. Now, one of the main things that I will go on about, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm going to, at risk of being a pedant, I am going to go over it again, just for clarity's sake. So the layout, very crisp, very bold. The print size is great. No notes, no complaints. We have art, but none of the art overshadows the text, and I can clearly read everything that's on here. The use of bold text is very good. The use of plenty of bullets is great. I just, very easy to read. Very easy also on your black and white printer if you want to print a copy of it, which I have. And this time I have it available to show you. So a few years ago, I invested in, had given to me a black and white laser jet printer, that the kind that uses toner cartridges, and it has a dualplex printing option on it. And this is not your most expensive printer. It's fancy enough for me, but you're not gonna get photo quality prints out of this thing. It is made for bulk printing in an office space, and that is perfect for me as an individual, because most of the printing I like doing is printing out PDFs of the games that I enjoy, so that I can then bind them in little binders like this, or with a coil binding, because I also invested in a coil binding machine, and that's more expensive. That cost more than the printer did, even though it's a very simple little coil hole punch, and then I put the coil in by hand. But anyway, we're digressing. I'll try to stop doing that. So this is the printed out copy. So we can see a size comparison. for those to whom this matters. Now, one of the reasons why I print this out, I printed it out because I got the PDF long before I got the book, and so that allowed me to actually sit down comfortably and read it. The other reason why I like printing these out is because since I'm a person with a visual impairment from birth, or you might say from knee-high to a grasshopper, I have had to get large print for most things. And this is just something that is part of my life. I can't imagine a world where I don't get large print for things. And that's one of the reasons why I have so consistently talked about print sizes and text, font styles and things like that in all of my reviews, because that's my world. And when I print these books like this, then they become even more accessible for me than they are in the digest size. Now, to be fair, when I'm traveling, I like the digest size. It fits nicely. Sometimes I can even fit it into a coat pocket or into a pouch of whatever bag that I'm taking with me at the time. And I can pull it out at the bus stop or the train station, and I can just read for a few minutes while I'm waiting for the train, or even while I'm riding on the train. And then I'm not pulling out my cell phone, which, is something that we need to be conscious of in this modern day and age, to try to, make sure that we're still being at least moderately aware of our surroundings and to reduce our overall over-attachment to these particular cellular devices. So this book is great for that. And because Mr. Spawn has paid such attention to print size and to all those factors that I mentioned before, it's easy for me to read in the digest size. It's even easier when I print it out like this. And so I have done this. I have made these copies before, and when I'm going to be running a game for family, I like to bring my larger print size copies with me because it makes it easier for me to reference on the fly, because I can read it from slightly further away, which means that I can respond faster to things instead of having to take the extra seconds that it takes to read the page otherwise. If you are a game master, sometimes those seconds can matter, and I try to reduce dead time as much as I can in my games. I know that might not sound like that from my videos, but it is an effort that I make. Okay, so this game takes you up to level 5. All characters are level 5. For the purposes of a starter set, kind of like a basic edition, that's perfect. Because really, White Box Dungeon Adventures is kind of the basic edition version, or the introductory set version of the White Box Cyclopedia. You don't have to use it that way. You can use it as its own thing, but that's kind of how Mr. Spawn designed it, and I like that. I have found that I tend to use it on its own most, especially with my first level games, but I am starting to incorporate more Cyclopedia details into my games as I go, as I become more comfortable with the characters that I'm running and thinking those characters might survive longer than a single session, so it just gets more fun that way. Plus, I really enjoy incorporating things like dread and corruption into the games, which is something I might go into more detail on in a future video. We'll see. All right. It's got monsters. It has magic items. It's got all the things that you need. This book is a one-stop shop for levels 1 to 5 of a very simplified version of the White Box Cyclopedia game. And yet all the information in it is the same as what you get in the White Box Cyclopedia. You don't get different equipment lists. You get a smaller equipment list, but all the prices and whatnot are the same. They're shared between the two things. So I think that's pretty cool. At least as far as I can tell they are. I mean, all right. And that's pretty much the whole shtick of the White Box Dungeon Adventures. It's really solid. It has a lot of cool little DM advice in it that I think is a positive thing for the game. And there's also a neat little expansion here in the White Box Dungeon Adventures Dungeon Bestiary. And that actually is something that I'm using more than I'm using the Rules Cyclopedia at the moment, because it expands out the monsters that are available without necessarily adding in any of the complexities that the subsystems of the White Box Cyclopedia have inherent in them. It doesn't include like the optional rules that you see in the White Box Cyclopedia. Neither of these books have those optional rules. It just, just the brass tacks, folks, just the brass tacks. What's neat that it has is some cool random encounter tables that you can use that incorporate both the monsters in the Dungeon Adventures core book as well as the Dungeon Adventures bestiary, so that you can then stock your dungeon with confidence using these lists. The only thing that I will say that I have found through my experience is using the dungeon monster stocking rules in White Box Dungeon Adventures can create very dangerous encounters very easily. I have had scenarios where I was having 4 first level characters, well, and one or two fourth level characters at the time, face off against 8 centipedes, giant centipedes, which is may not seem like much, but each time those giant centipedes hit someone, they have to save or die versus poison. And yes, they get a bonus to that save because the centipede's poison isn't as bad, but it still is enough to make anyone, including someone playing a 4th level character, go, ah! And I think that's good and that's fine. But when I've been playing them against my one first level characters using the solo rules that I kind of was working on, that's where most of my characters died, was against the giant centipedes. So it's kind of I have to kind of laugh at that, because you get basically 2d6 of any 1 hit die creature is 2d6 of those. And that can be a lot. But part of that is also DM judgment. You know how many characters you're sending into the dungeon, so you know whether or not that's going to be enough to handle. So one of the house rules that I used for that was I set all monster appearing numbers to 1 when I only had one PC. And in a sense, for me, that kind of was emulating more of the experience that you get when playing a game like, say, Skyrim, where you're not, yes, you can go into a scenario and you're going to be fighting a lot of monsters in the cave or in the dungeon or in the fort and whatnot, but you usually are only fighting 1 or 2 at a time. And as I have found, even when you are limiting the numbers of monsters in an encounter to 1, the chance of having a random encounter come in even while you're exploring a room that already or you're in a room that already has a monster in it, there's a chance you're going to be facing 2 monsters at the same time. So even just that one-on-one thing still actually kind of works out, and it creates a certain atmosphere to the game. Now, in my latest playtest, or not playtest, my latest chapter that I've been working on, I actually had 3 characters go into the dungeon. So I reinstated the 2d6 monsters, and I ended up having them face off against 6 skeletons, and they did survive, but one of them almost died. So that was kind of That was a neat thing to do. The other house rule that I use, because that's the other topic I wanted to talk about this video, is the house rules that I use with Dungeon Adventures. The other house rule that I use is I replace the d20 with 3d6. Now, I do this for several reasons. One, I like the bell curve. I'm a fairly decent bell curve fan, and there's other games that I've played that use bell curves in their dice mechanics, and I think it's nice. It helps all those modifiers actually really mean something, and also it's kind of, to me, helps lower armor classes also mean something, at least at the beginning of the game, because if you don't have if you're not going off a bell curve, there's an equal chance of every number appearing. And then all you're doing is saying like, oh, I've got to get a 14 or higher with this. Yeah, I have just as much chance of doing that here as I do with everything else. Fine. But with the bell curve, then a starting character trying to hit that armor class 14 chainmail armored goblin, or trying to be hit by that goblin when they're wearing chainmail, they suddenly can be a little more protected. That chainmail means a little bit more with the bell curve dice rolls at first level than it does at higher levels, or with a d20. Same with plate mail, the armor class of 16, because now you have to try to roll a 16 or higher on 3 6-sided dice, and that's a lot harder to do. Now, once you go up in level, you're going to have enough modifiers and bonuses that hitting a 16 starts to become easier and might even be achievable by a character who rolls average on 3 6-sided dice. But by the time they get there, they've earned it. It's not just something that gets given to them right away. And I kind of like that. I also kind of like the idea, because if something happens to your character and they have to go in with just leather armor instead of chainmail, they're not automatically just going to die, because the leather armor will protect them against a lot of monsters. Because most of those monsters, they're only going to have a +1, and the average is going to be, 9, which means that they'll get, on average, they'll be facing a 10, which means that an armor class of 11 or 12 is enough to protect them from the average attack, which is cool. And that's one reason why I use that. The other reason why I use it is because when I run games for other people with visual impairments, 3 6-sided dice are easier to get with tactile dice, so that they can be read by someone who has no vision, than a set of polyhedral dice is. Now, yes, you can, if you have a friend who has a 3D printer, or you yourself have a 3D printer, you can print out a set of polyhedral dice. But trying to purchase one that is brailled is very expensive. At least as the last time I was checking for that, it was going to cost about $50 to $60 to purchase a set from someone who was willing to print them. And I wasn't really impressed. Now, hopefully, and maybe someone will correct me, that was probably about 2 years ago when I was doing that. Maybe in the past 2 years, someone has finally filled that gap with affordable braille dice. And I'd be very excited to hear that. But when I was doing this and trying to run games on a regular basis, I found that the only thing I could do was use my little FDM 3D printer that I had to print my own dice. And that had its own set of challenges, but it was that's the only way I was able to get brailled 20-sided dice. However, you can go on Amazon and buy tactile 6-sided dice. They're not cheap necessarily, but they're a heck of a lot cheaper than trying to get braille dice of other sizes. I was able to get like 2 dice for $6. And if you only need 3 dice, maybe, you know, 4 if you buy 2 sets. So that's $12 for a set of dice for a kid. I mean, that's not bad. That's manageable monies. And so I actually put together a collection of those dice in order to help facilitate teaching kids and teenagers how to play these games when they might have a visual impairment, maybe couldn't access dice of other types as easily. And so that's one of the reasons why I use that house rule. That's my experience with it. It's one of the reasons why I like white box style games, is because everything else in those white box style games runs off of a D6. So this moment I change the D20 to 3D6s, now the whole game runs off of D6s, and it's a lot easier to teach. Now the downside is that, you know, those people that I'm teaching aren't necessarily learning how to play standard D&D, which they can do if they have dice rolling programs. That's a different topic, but we'll talk about that another time. Anyway, back to topic. Back on topic. So that's why I use that house rule. So far, I found it to be effective, and I enjoy it. The math, there's not a lot of math. You're adding 3 dice together. What big whoop. No big deal. The other house rule that I have incorporated, which I kind of like, is I've replaced combat machine with the idea that every modifier to every bonus to a fighter's attack roll grants an additional d6 to their damage roll, which means that a first level fighter in this game has a +1 attack bonus, which means that their damage would be 2d6 plus or minus whatever modifiers they would get for the weapon they're using. So if they're using a short sword or short bow, it's 2d6 minus 2. If they're using a great sword, it's 2d6 plus 2. And if you are 5th level, which gives you a +3 modifier to your attacks, then it's going to be 4d6 plus or minus 4 if you have the larger or the smaller weapons, or just a straight 4d6. This replaces combat machine, so that means that if you're surrounded by goblins, you're still going to get surrounded and you could get ganked. Yes, you're going to be killing one of those goblins as long as you hit pretty solidly every round, but those other goblins can still do their worst on you. And because it is tied specifically to the combat machine rule, then classes and monsters that don't get combat machine don't get this bonus. This is a thing for fighters. This is part of what makes what's in my games, makes fighters awesome and allows them to compete for the spotlight with a higher level wizard without changing fundamentally how the fighter functions at the table, and giving them more things to have to manage. I like the idea of the fighter being the class that you can just kind of pick up and play without having to think about it too much, because you need an entry-level class somewhere. Now, in this game, almost every class is an entry-level class, which is another thing I love about it. That's not something that other game systems and more modern iterations of Dungeons & Dragons can claim anymore. But that's another thing that I use. So far, it's worked out fine. The biggest hurdle is trying to decide. It was because at first I was trying to connect it to just the attack modifier, and that would mean that wizards could eventually get it when they eventually earn their attack modifier. Same with clerics, same with thieves. Yes, the one thing that does kind of happen is a thief, if you're using the traditional thief, they're going to have themselves outclassed by the fighter pretty fast when it comes to dealing damage. That is a casualty of this house rule, and I won't pretend otherwise. But there's no thief in this version of the game. Yes, there is a thief or a rogue in White Box Cyclopedia, but I think that the thief has enough other things that are their own outside of backstabbing that I'm kind of okay with it. I think that a thief or a rogue is able to do a lot of skill based things. But at the same time, I also kind of like the idea that if there's no thief or rogue class, then all of those, lock picking and detecting traps becomes things that all the other classes can do without much trouble. And I like the idea of not necessarily having a class that is dedicated to those things, because you can then have like a fighter who's also a thief, kind of like Conan the Barbarian. Or you can have a cleric who is also, has a dark past that maybe they had to, do penance for, but at the same time they haven't forgotten their skills. You can have a wizard who is also a little bit of a rogue, shall we say. Why not? And you don't need special rules to be able to do it. You can just do it. And if there's no specific role for the thief, then you're not stepping on anyone's toes when you do that. So why not? But I think that pretty much covers a lot of what I wanted to say about this. I do kind of want to go over a lot more of the white box products that Mr. Spawn has been putting out, because I think there's a lot of neat stuff there that would enhance people's games, and I want to give a bit of a more of a spotlight to what he's been working on in this particular Mailu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Anyway, this particular part of the hobby, especially since the White Box Quarterly 3 just dropped, and I haven't even finished reading it yet, but it's really awesome. So far, it's really awesome. So that'll be some stuff that I come up with in the future. You can look forward to that. It is my favorite system at the moment, so expect to see me doing more coverage for it. I probably will. I expect to be doing less coverage of the Prince Valiant system moving forward, simply because I've kind of reached the apex of what I can do with that system in and of itself. And since it is so out of print, I feel almost guilty talking about it, because it's so hard for anyone else to get their hands on, and I don't like providing information or providing support for anyone who's trying to sell this for exorbitant prices. um but that's a different topic. Sorry, I'm digressing again. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you have a wonderful day, and peace be with you. Bye bye.